Congressman Mark Pocan. Middays with Mark, taking your calls for the hour at 202-808-9925. Congressman Pocan represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. He is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Pocan.house.gov is the website. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. Congressman, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Glad to be here.
Great to have you with us. So the excuse me, I'm looking at the wrong camera here. So the bank bill, let's deregulate the banks and take us back to close to where we were in 2007 so that the banksters can run off with all the profits again and crash our economy. And by the way, this is on the heels of the announcement, I believe it was yesterday, the day before, that the biggest banks in America, the 6 biggest banks, just had their most profitable quarter, more profitable than they were during the Roaring '20s, more profitable than they were in the '40s, '50s, '60s, '70s, '80s, '90s. This is their most profitable quarter in history. And the Republicans said, hey, and 33 Democrats in the House said, hey, let's deregulate them. What the hell's going on here? Forgive my French.
This is one where, Elizabeth Warren, I think, deserves a lot of credit. She's taken on, I think, the face of this bill, especially after she stood up against some of her Senate Democrat colleagues who voted for it. I think 17 of them did. In our House, we had a little better in that Leader Pelosi and Maxine Waters, who's ranking on financial services, both opposed this and asked people not to vote for it. We whipped against the bill from the Progressive Caucus. But, at the end of the day, this is a bill that's a giant wet kiss to Wall Street. I think legitimately there are some credit unions and community banks that some of the regulations could be looked at differently than are currently in place. But what this bill does is none of that. It goes farther, and 25 of the 38 largest banks in the country are now considered to have less regulation because of this bill, basically raising the standard from $50 billion to $250 billion to be a smaller bank. Just these banks alone have about $3.5 trillion in assets, about 1/6 of all the money that's out there in the banking sector. And these banks also took about $47 billion in assistance during the 2008 crash. So to say that these are the smaller partners is really a leap. This is really about rolling back Dodd-Frank protections. And there's some other important things in there, like the information that we collected around history of getting loans. The Home Mortgage Disclosure Act portion has been rolled back for all these banks. And that's how we actually know if people are discriminating and doing some of the practices that were really bad previously. So there's a whole bunch of bad things in this bill. It's going to the president's desk. He is going to sign it. Wall Street will stop champagne corks. But unfortunately, it didn't really help the consumer at all. And, if they really wanted to fix something for small credit unions and community banks, we could have done something. This just completely blew a hole in Dodd-Frank for, like I said, 25 of the 38 biggest banks.
How does this bill harm communities of color?
So it's how we collect information. There was a lot of redlining and other things done on how people were making loans leading into the crisis. And out of Dodd-Frank, we collected more data on who they're talking to and who they're turning down and why they're turning down and things. Now it's taking away all that data. So basically, you're opening the door to allow discrimination again. And this is something that, for the 33 Democrats in the House and the 17 in the Senate who voted for, they should be ashamed of themselves, because this is something that I think was one of the more important provisions that we had out there to make sure that some people weren't just getting access and some people weren't when it comes to loans and financial services.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. Leslie Stahl made a comment yesterday or day before at I think it was a PBS forum, and it was pretty shocking. I'm assuming you saw that.
Yeah, and it didn't get as much attention as I had hoped it would have, because it's something I think we all know, but to actually hear it, that the president said it, means all the more. So when she did an interview with him, the president said, I'll read what she's saying his comments were. As he said, his quote, "You know why I do it?" Talking about why he goes after the media. He said, "You know why I do it? I do it to discredit you all and demean you all so that when you write negative stories about me, no one will believe you." And it's right from video. This is what he said. And that is exactly what he's been doing with the fake news, right? They've done this orchestrated campaign because he knows many of the things he does are outright lies or they're wrong for other reasons, and he doesn't want to have an objective third-party source, the media, to be able to point that out. So he's made a campaign and attack against them from the very beginning, from the campaign onward. And this is scary. I'm a journalism major. I mean, this is something that we, as institutions, as democracy, you need to have that objective source. And what he's doing is basically, it's very Putin-like, it's very North Korea-like, right? And I think the fact that there's, some video and that this is now coming out, that people are realizing, I'm hoping it has an impact, although, as you know, 35% of the people, nothing seems to have an impact.
Well, this is also, Viktor Orban in Hungary, Duterte in the Philippines, right. Erdogan in Turkey. I mean, this is a growing trend all over the world of authoritarian regimes trashing the press. This is really, really grim stuff, and it benefits the billionaire-owned right-wing media, the Mercers, the billionaire Mercers supporting Breitbart, bringing it back from life support, billionaire Rupert Murdoch with Fox so-called News, the billionaires who own the two big radio station conglomerates or whatever you call them, owned by billionaires. And at the same time, it diminishes the credibility of all the non-billionaire owned media, or just all the rest of the media, I guess. And it seems to me that that's probably why Fox and right-wing hate radio are so and Breitbart are so enthusiastically embracing this. If the right-wing, hardcore right-wing billionaire class can cause us to think that if something shows up in the news, that it may well be a lie if it's not on Fox or Breitbart, which carefully curate their content and never trash billionaires or giant corporations that are committing crimes, then they, I mean, whoever controls the media controls the country ultimately. I mean, this could be, in the George Orwell sense, the 1984 sense, this could well be the beginning of the end of democracy in America. Or do you think I'm overstating this?
No, I'll admit I'm maybe a bit biased because I was a journalism school major coming out of college, but I have respect for that institution because it's part of why we have a democracy. A vibrant democracy is, people participate through the electoral process. You've got an independent place to check on facts, so it's not like you're waiting for some supreme leader to tell you what a fact is. And it appears that Donald Trump wants to go back to being the supreme leader who tells us what a fact is, like in a lot of other third world and other authoritarian countries. So, I do find great concern, and that's why, I think more people need to talk about this. There are all the other stuff that's out there. This has really been a very organized, devious, brilliant strategy on behalf of Donald Trump and the right wing.
Yeah. And the last thing I wanted to get to, and then we're going to hit a break and we'll start picking up calls because people are just now starting to call in. Yesterday in Georgia, in the Georgia primary, the Democratic primary, I thought this was fascinating because we had Stacey Evans, as I recall her name is, who was supported by the Democratic establishment, essentially. You had Stacey Abrams, who was a Bernie progressive, essentially. She didn't bind herself to Bernie, but all her positions were identical, or most of them, the vast majority of them, free health care, Medicare for all, free college, all this kind of stuff. And what I thought was, Stacey Abrams won that walking away, like 73 to 20-something. But what really struck me a couple of days ago was that Hillary Clinton endorsed Stacey Abrams, the very progressive candidate. I think that even the so-called establishment Democrats are getting it, that this is how to win elections, is to go back to the FDR roots of the party. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen in the last several weeks, it's been, progressives are winning in these primaries, but they're winning because not just because it's a Democratic primary, because there are superior candidates, and they're talking about issues that resonate beyond just a Democratic primary base. I had a chance to meet Stacey Abrams a few weeks ago when I was in Atlanta. She's an amazing candidate. This is a race that should get national attention because we have a chance to elect the first African-American female governor of any state, but also she's just a solid, great progressive in a state that's emerging to be more and more blue. this is something that should capture national attention because, let's face it, things aren't happening at the federal government in a useful way right now. We can see successes in our states and our local communities, and the more governors we have that can be those laboratories for democracy, when we get full control of the federal government again, we can get these things.